a connection problem relating to the infrastructure of the House. The problem has been fixed and the systems have been tested last night. All is now in order.
Of the House and its committees may continue, and technical resources will be available as needed. I would like to give my sincere thanks to all the devoted staff of the House who handled this situation diligently. Je remercie les députés.
I'd like to thank members for their attention.
Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Spadina North or Fourth York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On July 1st, Canadians will celebrate Canada's 155th birthday. As a son of refugees, Canada has presented me and my family with not just a home, but also opportunities and a future. Even in tough times, this country rises above many others. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in free health care for all. We believe in assistance for those in need. We believe in the people's right to be heard. We don't have tanks on the streets. Many other countries don't enjoy this way of life. We have a lot to be thankful for, but it didn't happen by accident. It took a lot of hard work to forge the nation that we are today. We're not perfect, but I would say we're pretty close. We'll face our challenges, we will be respectful, we will be inclusive as we move forward together to build an even better country. This upcoming Canada Day, let us reaffirm our common values and go forward. On behalf of the people of my riding, I hope everyone can stay safe and celebrate this magnificent country in their own unique way. Happy birthday, Canada.
The honourable member for Don Valley North.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I rise today to recognize a very special person from Don Valley North. Mr. Jim Wilson was born in Toronto in September 1921. He joined the Canadian Army at age of 22, where he was sent to England with the Glengarry Highlander 9th Brigade, 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. Jim was amongst the 14,000 Canadians who stormed Juno Beach with Allied forces on D-Day. He was ashore during the second wave with the goal of advancing 16 kilometers inland to occupy the high ground west of the strategic city of Caen. Following weeks of fighting, finally Caen was secured and Jim's division continued eastward to Belgium and then Holland. Unfortunately, that's where he got shot. In 1946, Jim returned to Toronto, where he found the love of his life, his late wife, Audrey, and began a successful career with Esso. Last month, Jim was made a Knight of the French National Order of the Legion of Honor for his immense contribution to the liberation of France during World War II. Colleagues, please join me in applauding this great Canadian, Mr. Jim Wilson.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to recognize Ola and Linda, the two wonderful ladies who run my Edmonton constituency office.
Hear, hear!
The two are probably the most experienced team in Alberta, with Ola having worked with MPs Peter Goldring and Laurie Hahn before me, and Linda working with Laurie Hahn as well. Now, my friend, the good chap, the Honourable Laurie Hahn, often compared his constituency to a car. He would explain that he was merely the hood ornament and that the office team were the engine. That is to say that the real work, the heavy lifting, was done by the team, and he was, again, just the hood ornament. And he was completely right. I'm very blessed that Ola and Linda have been the engine for my Edmonton team since I was elected. Laurie would also say the best part of being an MP was helping people, and the worst part was the travel. While the joy I get when I receive a letter or card thanking Linda and Ola for helping a family reunite, get their passport, or fix a CRA problem, more than makes up for the hours spent waiting for a connection at Pearson. So Ola and Linda, thank you for everything you've done and your service to the people of Edmonton West.
Hear, hear! Way to go!
The honourable member for Mississauga, Streetsville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The month of June marks Pride Month. Canadians across the country are celebrating and recognizing the invaluable contributions of the LGBTQIA2S+ community in areas such as health, politics, academia, sports, our military, and many other fields. We celebrate Pride to embrace LGBTQIA2S+ people and acknowledge the decades-long struggles and sacrifices made to gain the equality they rightfully deserve. While we may have made progress over the years, we know that we must continue to keep building a more tolerant and peaceful society. So let's stand shoulder to shoulder with the LGBTQIA2S+ Canadians and friends as allies, including people living with disabilities, Indigenous, Black, and racialized members of the LGBTQIA2S+ community. On behalf of my constituents in Mississauga-Streetsville, I wish all Canadians a happy Pride Month, and we all know that love is love. To all of you, have a safe and enjoyable summer break. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year, for our national holiday, we're going to make our language ring out in 1,000 accents. We'll make it heard loud, we'll make it heard late, and we'll make it heard together. We'll make each of our regional ways of speaking heard. We'll make each of our accents heard, reminding us that our national language is also a great international language and an extraordinary tool for opening up to the whole world. We are going to make our language heard so loud that the whole planet will hear this proud and unique voice, the voice of a nation celebrating its culture with its common language, the voice of a nation that sings, writes, works, teaches, grows, and lives in French, because that's what unites us and brings us together, regardless of our differences. And this voice, they're going to hear that we're not shy about celebrating it, not shy about promoting it, and not shy about protecting it. Because French is who we are. To all Quebecers, with their 1,000 accents, happy national holiday. The Honourable Member for Lac Saint Louis.
The congregation at Beaconsfield United Church celebrated the Reverend Sean Friday as he prepared to embark on a well-deserved retirement after 22 years of dedicated pastoral service. Sean's boundless goodwill and warm humanity will be dearly missed by church members and indeed by the entire Montreal West Island community. In addition to his role as spiritual leader, Sean displayed vision and determination in his efforts to strengthen the foundations of community. He was a driving force in the creation of the West Island LGBTQ2+ Center and served as the organization's chair, offering wisdom, support, and guidance. Sean's ministry was also marked by a deep commitment to social justice overseas. He traveled 5 times to the Philippines in support of Indigenous communities, defending their rights against local mining operations. Like so many, I will miss Reverend Sean's spiritual and community leadership, but also his engaging voice on matters of government policy.
Bravo. Well, member for Niagara West.
Today I'm proud to share the story of James Topp. James is a veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. He has served for 29 years. James is marching on foot from Vancouver to Ottawa to support Canadians hurt by vaccine mandates. The march started at the Terry Fox statue in Vancouver and is ending at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Ottawa. That's 4,293 kilometers in approximately 130 days. James himself has suffered the consequences of punishing vaccine mandate policy. He was placed on leave without pay from his civilian position in the RCMP. He is also currently in the process of being released from the Canadian Armed Forces, all because of a medical decision. I invite all MPs in the House to meet James and to hear his story and the stories of those he's met along the way to Ottawa. Starting a conversation and listening to each other during these difficult times when our country seems so divided is the only path forward. James has started the conversation, and I intend to participate for the good of our country.
Here. Here, here. The Honourable Member for Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of grade 8 students at Thomas Street Middle School in Mississauga, Erin Mills, to highlight an important figure in our history, Matthew Da Costa. Matthew Da Costa is said to be the first recorded person of African descent to set foot on this land that we now call Canada. He is one of so many Canadians of African descent who have helped build this country since long before Confederation. He's a gifted linguist and played a vital role in building early relations with Indigenous peoples of this land. In particular, he is said to have served as an interpreter between French explorers and the Mi'kmaq people. Today, he's recognized from coast to coast to coast in museums, monuments, roads, and schools. Mr. Speaker, I am glad that these stories have been so inspiring to youth in my riding of Mississauga Erin Mills. It's always a good time to celebrate Black history in Canada, and I hope that we can all continue to recognize accomplishments of our diverse communities all across this beautiful nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South Centre. I believe the honourable member's on mute.
Mr. Speaker, for the first time since the start of the pandemic, the schools in Winnipeg South Centre have completed an entire school year in person. For the next 2 weeks, I will be attending the farewell ceremonies and convocations of schools to offer warm congratulations to students on a year of success and for committing to their studies and persevering during uncertain times. Mr. Speaker, everyone deserves to have a bright future full of possibilities ahead of them, and I am confident that the class of 22 will take full advantage of their moment. I wish the graduates every success as they move on to the next exciting chapter of their lives and their careers. Good luck, graduates.
The honourable member for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, my constituency is proudly home to 4 teams in the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. This includes the Dauphin Kings, Neepawa Titans, Swan Valley Stampeders, and the Wayway-Sakapo Wolverines. I rise today to congratulate all of them on a fantastic season, but I want to especially congratulate the Dauphin Kings on a stellar year of hockey. Last month, after a nail-biting Game 7 against the Steinbach Pistons, the Dauphin Kings were victorious in the MJHA Finals. Congratulations to all the players who worked hard to win the Turnbull Memorial Trophy. And congratulations to Coach and General Manager Doug Headley for leading a great team to victory. I also want to thank the community of Dauphin for rallying behind the Kings and expressing their unwavering support in countless ways. Next year, the National Centennial Cup will be hosted in Portage-la-Prairie, and I have no doubt that one of my riding's MJHL teams will claim victory.
The honourable member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to Constable Vijay Madhyalagan, a Tamil Canadian who led a life in exemplary service to his adopted country, Canada. Vijay enlisted in the Canadian Armed Forces in 2011 and served in the 2nd Combat Engineering Regiment. He notably served in Ukraine in 2018 as part of Operation Unifier, where he used his expertise in explosive ordnance disposal to train local forces in mine clearing. These skills undoubtedly helped save the lives of many Ukrainian soldiers and civilians in the dreadful war that ensued. In 2020, Vijay joined the Ottawa Police Service and was assigned the frontline operations with A Platoon Central. Vijay was highly respected by his colleagues in the city of Ottawa, with many remembering him for his kind nature and selflessness. He will be sorely missed by the Canadian military, Ottawa Police Services, his close-knit Ottawa Tamil community, and the growing network of Tamil law enforcement professionals across Canada. He leaves behind a proud family, community, and country, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Mission Matsky Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, June 21st was National Indigenous Peoples Day, and June is Indigenous History Month. Throughout my riding, there have been events showcasing and celebrating Indigenous and Métis culture. I am proud to represent the #1 riding in Canada, Mission Matsky Fraser Canyon. And what makes my riding so great is that it's home to the Stahelis and Stalo people, the Statlian people, the Shwetmuk people, and the Inca Clackmuck people in the Fraser Canyon, as well as many others. Last weekend, I was pleased to participate in Sasquatch Days, and I am so proud to represent the riding that is home to the mythical Sasquatch. Children from one of our local Indigenous dance clubs did the Sasquatch dance, and Indigenous groups from across BC and Washington State took part in competitive canoe races for all ages. What a great way to celebrate sport and to bring people together. Thank you to the organizers from the village of Harrison Hot Springs and the Stahelis people for putting on such a wonderful event. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord.
La liste est pas bonne, la liste.
The list is wrong, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week there was a landslide in my riding in La Baie. One home collapsed, but fortunately there were no casualties. Since then, close to 80 families have been evacuated and are now homeless. It's terrible. The city of Saguenay forecasts another major landslide in the weeks to come. This worries me a lot. Earlier this week, I spoke with the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, who assured me he's ready to intervene on behalf of the people of La Baie as soon as the provincial government requests it. I thank him for his cooperation. In these difficult and uncertain times, I take comfort in seeing all levels of government working together and joining forces to ensure that families are not left to fend for themselves. To the firefighters and police officers, I thank you for your good work in evacuating the families. To all the people affected, I say to you, stay strong. My heart goes out to you, and I will not let you down. In Saguenay, we help each other out.
The Honourable Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the plight of a 45-year-old female has been brought to my attention by Judith Goldberg, a principal in my riding. With teachers and students at Forest Run School who are passionate and determined to do something about this situation, they have written poetry, created art, a website, and ultimately circulated a petition. This female has been kept captive for over 40 years, pregnant 5 times, each time she lost her child and was left to mourn on her own. She lives alone in a concrete space with little room to move about. I visited the school and spoke with some of the students. One young boy looked at me confused, and he asked, "What if someone did that to us?" The 45-year-old female is named Kiska. She's an orca whale, a sentient being like us, highly intelligent and sensitive, and currently a captive at Marineland. This House passed Bill S-203 in 2019 to end the captivities of whales, but Kiska was not released. Her misery was grandfathered. She could live somewhere, such as the Nova Scotia Whale Sanctuary, and have decades left, if we don't allow her to die first due to her confinement. Judith and her students know it is wrong for us to condone this in 2022. It's past time for us to do the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, today I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the incredible team of Ukrainian interns who have been working in our offices over the past several months. Hear, hear. May I continue, Mr. Speaker? Parliamentarians have benefited from the work of these dedicated young leaders in the past, but of course, this time it is very different. While Russia wages an illegal war in their homeland, while Russia is committing a genocide against their people, and while Ukrainians are fighting heroically for their freedom and democracy, these amazing women have been here helping us with our democracy. In particular, I want to thank my intern, Maria. It has been an incredible pleasure to work with her. And to all the 2022 Ukrainian interns, thank you for strengthening the bond between Canada and Ukraine. Thank you for reminding us every day that democracy matters in Ukraine and everywhere in the world. And thank you so much for being here. Hear, hear.
I'm going to assume we had unanimous consent to bypass the standing orders there.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Temiskaming. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to extend my warm greetings and congratulations to the representatives of Équipe Québec and the Équipe Québec Foundation. Not just once, but for the 3rd time, our Quebec teams are world champions. Once again this year, we are the world ball hockey champions in the 3 categories of competition, women, masters, and men, held in Mont-Tremblant, Quebec. Congratulations to Patrick Ducharme and Alex Burrows for their commitment to promoting the emerging sport of ball hockey. Congratulations and thanks to the organizers. Congratulations and recognition also to the Équipe Quebec Foundation. I'd like to mention the contribution of Robert Sirois and Stéphane Aliger for their dedication to providing Quebec athletes with more access to international competitions, wearing their Quebec colors in all sporting events. As you know, Mr. Speaker, I got involved in politics to experience moments of national pride like I did on June 12th in Mont-Tremblant and to relive them at every international sporting event. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Speaker, the cost of living crisis is real, and it's hurting Canadians in my riding and across Canada. Inflation hit a 40-year high of 7.7%, and all the Liberals are doing is playing the blame game. Inflation has increased the price of groceries by more than 25%, which is lowering the amount of food that families and seniors can put on their tables. The cost of fuel has been increasing, which also has a direct impact on the cost of production and the cost to transport food to grocery stores. The stories I'm hearing from my communities, they're heartbreaking. The food banks in our small towns, our rural towns, are busier than they've ever been, and demand is going up exponentially. Skyrocketing food prices are driving up food security concerns across the board. One woman even caught her neighbor, her senior neighbor, eating canned cat food because she couldn't afford groceries. Many more seniors have told me that they believe the hardship and lack of support is because the government is waiting for them to die. That's unacceptable, and the Liberal government is letting this happen.
Shameful. The Honourable Member for Brampton East.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize and commend the retirement of one of my constituents, Ms. Diana Nagara. For the past 32 years, Diana has served both her Brampton and neighbouring Toronto community as a court officer with the Toronto Police Services. As a first-generation Canadian to immigrant parents, Diana has played an important role in assisting with policing and community services across the GTA. To name a few, her achievements include facilitating various contraband raids, helping save the life of an individual that went into cardiac arrest in the courtroom. In the latter part of her career, Diana has helped train and test a new integrated computer system that will help police officers and courthouses increase reporting efficiencies. Like many frontline workers throughout the pandemic, Diana continued to work and fulfill her duties. Diana can now expect a well-earned, restful retirement with her husband, Kelvin, who is also a former court officer with 33 years of service, her mother, Anna, her adult children, and her first grandchild, Sebastian. Please join me in congratulating Diana and wishing her the best during her retirement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before continuing to question period, I just want to remind everyone that referring to anyone in the gallery is not permitted. J'aimerais vous appeler que quand on fait des...
I'd like to remind you that when we make statements in the House, we can't refer to the presence of anyone in the gallery. That's a little reminder for everyone. And while I'm at it,
well, that when we're referring to someone, whether in a question or an answer, it is by their title or by their writing, whichever one is more convenient. Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Accusations that the Prime Minister used the Nova Scotia mass shooting to advance his political agenda are extremely troubling. We believe Superintendent Darren Campbell when he says that Commissioner Leckie pressured the RCMP to reveal certain information. We also believe that it's possible the Commissioner was pressured by the PMO and Public Safety Minister's office. These Liberals have a pattern of interfering in investigations to advance their political agenda, just like we saw in SNC-Lavalin. Will the government commit today to a full and open and transparent investigation to get to the bottom of this?
Well, Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
Speaker, the independence of law enforcement operations is a key principle of our democracy, and it's one that our government deeply respects and one that I have always defended. At no point, Mr. Speaker, did our government pressure or interfere in the operational decisions of the RCMP. And I would take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to direct the members to the Commissioner's statement from yesterday, in which he makes it very clear that there was no interference.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, somebody is not telling the truth, and it is not Superintendent Darren Campbell. Mr. Speaker, he did not just experience this differently. We know the Liberals have a track record of interfering in investigations when it's to their advantage, and when they're caught, they deny, then they deflect, and then they blame. It's sickening to think that they're using the worst mass shooting in Canadian history for political gain, but it is very possible. We need to get to the truth on this, Mr. Speaker. Again, I'm going to ask the minister, I'm going to ask the government, will they commit to a full and an open investigation?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to share with the members opposite the truth. And in fact, yesterday, the Commissioner of the RCMP released a statement in which she said, and I quote, it is important to note that the sharing of information and briefings with the Minister of Public Safety are necessary, particularly during a mass shooting on Canadian soil. This is standard procedure and does not impact the integrity of ongoing investigations or interfere with the independence of the RCMP. And she concludes, and this is important, Mr. Speaker, I take the principle of police independence extremely seriously, and it has been and will continue to be fully respected in all interactions.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Deny, deflect, and blame, Mr. Speaker. Inflation, Mr. Speaker, has hit a 40-year high, and Canadians are worse off than they ever could have imagined. 7.7% inflation, and it's Canadians who are suffering. While Liberals blame COVID, Putin, and everything else, Conservatives have asked and are still asking that the Liberals cut taxes and give Canadians a break at the pumps. Even President Biden announced a 3-month gas tax break. But these Liberals cold-heartedly keep saying no. Liberals would rather see Canadians suffer than accept any of our good ideas. Isn't that the truth?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my honourable colleague is certainly correct that affordability is a critically important concern for Canadians. That is why the Deputy Prime Minister, in a speech last week, talked through the $9 billion in support that we are providing on that basis. We are also working to help stabilize global energy prices through increasing production of oil and gas alongside our partners, the United States, Brazil, and other countries, to ensure that we are concurrently addressing the energy crisis that exists in a manner that will ensure affordability for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Today's figures speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. Inflation is at its highest in the last 40 years, 7.7%. The Finance Minister's grandiose speech to the Toronto elite last week was just smoke and mirrors. There was absolutely nothing to counter inflation in our country, Mr. Speaker. Even President Biden is proposing a temporary gas tax cut to help Americans make ends meet. Liberals love expensive gas. We all know that. Why are they hurting Canadians instead of helping them to put food on the table, to pay for a roof over their house, to pay for their oil and gas? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nothing says that Conservative policies would have an effect on the price at the gas pump for Canadians, Mr. Speaker. What is certain is that we went all the way to the Supreme Court to defend our price on pollution, and the court sided with us. What is for sure is that Conservatives are out of ideas and that they do not know how to manage this economy. They don't know how to help Canadians. We know how to help Canadians so they can fight the increase of the cost of living. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that it is not just the cost of living that is suffering from inflation. Liberal incompetence is also on the rise. Incuriosity, laxity, crisis, lack of compassion. These are not my words. Those are the words of Canadians waiting for their passports for hours. They're waiting hours and days for a basic document. The minister admitted this morning that she knew months ago that the crisis was coming. Her solution comes today. We're going to change the waiting line to get a number, to get an appointment. So we wait in line in order to wait in line in order to wait in line to get a passport. Where's the logic in that? When will they finally work for Canadians, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister for Families. Mr. Speaker, the situation in Montreal is truly unacceptable, and that is the reason for which today we have changed the situation to make sure that those travelling in the next 24 hours receive their passport in time. For those who are travelling in over 48 hours, we have another strategy for them. Mr. Speaker, executives are there to work with people and talk to people in the waiting lines, because what they are experiencing is unacceptable, and we will make sure that they are served as good as possible. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I would like to wish bon voyage to the Prime Minister, but in a lovely chartered plane, his lovely passport that he got very easily. Well, in this context, thousands of people are still waiting overnight. They could have people skip their place in the line. Police have been chasing away media, and now they are being numbered like cattle. That is not a solution. It's just more chaos. It's worse. It doesn't work. Mr. Speaker, now that nothing works, what is the government doing for these people? The Honest Minister for Families. Mr. Speaker, the situation in Montreal is truly unacceptable, and it is different to what is happening elsewhere in our country. Over the past 4 days, over 1,000 people were waiting, and we think that people should not have to do so, and that is the reason for which we have teams, upper management teams, to help people and to make sure that they get the information that they need to ensure that they have appointments so that they can go home and then go back at a certain specific time so they don't have to wait. We know that this is frustrating. We know that it's an important file, and we will continue to react to the situation. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Minister keeps repeating that she has sent directives, but no one seems to be listening to the directives. All government ministers yesterday were saying that it was unacceptable. No one, however, has brought true solutions to the problem. Is that going to be the case until the end of 2022? Will nothing be done? If government ministers denounce instead of governing, who's going to govern? The Bloc Québécois, perhaps? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I think that all other parties in the House agree that the Bloc Québécois will never be the government here in the House, but we will make sure that Canadians will receive their passports. This is a difficult situation after 2 years. We understand that Canadians want to travel, and we know that for that they need their passport. Mr. Speaker, there is a very high demand for this. Service Canada staff is working very hard. They're working day, they're working nights in order to make sure that Canadians get their passports, and we will continue to react so that they have what they need.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inflation has reached the highest level since 1983. And what that means is that workers are having a harder and harder time making ends meet. We know that the solution proposed is to increase inflation or increase interest rates, but that's going to put more pressure on the shoulders of workers. So when will this government understand that workers didn't cause this inflation? They shouldn't bear the burden of it, and they need help. When will this government send help to families now?
Hear, hear. Well, Minister for Families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the honourable leader of the NDP's little person there. So congratulations to bringing him in. And in fact, this government is delivering for families. In fact, across the country, we have delivered 13 childcare.
I'm going to. I'm sure the Honourable Minister appreciates being cheered on, but it prevents us from hearing the answer. The Honourable Minister, from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, well, I just wanted to congratulate the Honourable Leader of the NDP for bringing his little person in here. It's wonderful to see, children here as well. But I'm so thrilled to hear the members opposite be so excited about childcare, because guess what, Mr. Speaker? There are 13 agreements right across the country that are helping families today. In fact, in many of those provinces, families are already receiving 50% off registered childcare fees, which in some provinces is between $2,000 and $4,000 additional dollars each year in their pockets. That's helping working Canadians, that's helping families, and that's helping our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Inflation is at its worst since 1983. This means that families find it very hard to make ends meet. If the only solution to rectify inflation is to increase interest rates, this will put even more pressure on the shoulders of families. A plan to reduce inflation has to help workers. When will this government finally deliver assistance to families? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, well, I have great news for the Honourable Leader of the NDP. We are delivering right now in 13 provinces and territories from coast to coast to coast. We are delivering agreements for childcare. That is thousands of dollars of savings for everyone with children. These are real dollars in real pockets to help them with the cost of living. We are here for families, we're here for kids, and for the country. Thank you.
For South Shore St. Margaret.
The mass murder of 22 of my fellow Nova Scotians and an unborn child being used as a Liberal gun control wedge is disgusting, obscene, and an insult to the victims and their families. The detailed investigative notes of RCMP officers, which will be used in court, state political interference into this mass murder. They were contradicted by the Public Safety Minister and the Commissioner of the RCMP. Who's telling the truth? The RCMP investigators or the Liberal politicians trying to interfere in the investigation?
Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like again to direct my honourable colleague to the Commissioner's statement, which I believe speaks for itself. The decision as to what information will be publicly disclosed regarding any investigation, as well as all operational matters, lies always and solely with the police. But, Mr. Speaker, let me also take the opportunity to acknowledge that the 2020 mass shootings in Nova Scotia has devastated families and communities, and particularly those families and loved ones of the 22 individuals that lost their lives. We should all keep them in our thoughts.
Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester.
Mr. Speaker, many in Nova Scotia are already concerned about the proceedings of the Mass Casualty Commission. Superintendent Campbell testified, and I quote, "The Commissioner said she had promised the Minister of Public Safety and the Prime Minister's office that the RCMP would release this information. The Commissioner then said that we didn't understand that this was tied to pending gun control legislation." Mr. Speaker, 22 individuals and an unborn baby died in my riding during this tragedy. We believe Superintendent Campbell. Does the Minister?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, I've never had a conversation with the superintendent, but the commissioner who did release a statement in which he said, "It's important to note that the sharing of information and briefings with the Minister of Public Safety are both necessary and particularly during a mass shooting on Canadian soil. This is standard procedure. It does not impact the integrity of any ongoing investigation or interfere with the independence of the RCMP." And she concluded, "I take the principle of police independence extremely seriously, and it has been and will continue to be fully respected in all interactions."
Member for Cumberland Colchester.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government has somehow managed to use politics to interfere with a cross-border police investigation. They hoped it would advance their potential gun control legislation. This interference further undermined the public confidence in the police investigation as to how the killer managed to obtain and smuggle illegal guns into Canada. How long after this tragedy did the Minister discuss the gun legislation and the resulting order in Council, which happened 10 days later, with Commissioner Lucky?
Good question. Honourable Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would remind the member that we actually campaigned in 2019 on our promise to Canadians that we would strengthen gun control and that we would ban assault-style rifles. Mr. Speaker, in May of 2020, we kept that promise. But, Mr. Speaker, the independence of law enforcement operations remains a key principle of our democracy. It's one our government has always respected and one that I have always defended. Mr. Speaker, at no point did our government pressure or interfere in any of the operational decisions of the RCMP.
The Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's becoming increasingly clear why this government wanted to have a secret inquiry on this. In a statement yesterday, RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki did not deny that she promised the Minister of Emergency Preparedness that she would release information surrounding the Nova Scotia mass shooting. People are not in the habit of making promises unless they're asked to do so. Did the Minister of Emergency Preparedness or his staff at any time ask the Commissioner to publicly release information regarding the Nova Scotia mass shooting? Yes or no?
Yes. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The very short answer to the member's question is no. And finally, I would point out again to the Commissioner's statement in which she said, I take the principle of police independence extremely seriously, and it has been and will continue to be fully respected in all interactions. Mr. Speaker, that's the facts.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has gone from inappropriately interfering with prosecutions to interfering with police investigations. To this Prime Minister, the murder of 22 people isn't tragedy, but political opportunity. Superintendent Campbell made it clear. The Commissioner said she had promised the Minister of Public Safety and the Prime Minister's office that the RCMP would release this information. The Commissioner then said that we didn't understand and that this was tied to pending gun control legislation. Will the NDP Liberal government allow the Public Safety Committee to fully investigate this shocking revelation?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
And again, Mr. Speaker, I would point out to the member the statement that it was actually issued by the Commissioner of the RCMP, in which she made it crystal clear.
Order. Order.
Yes, they are discussing.
Biddle gave him the finger.
Throwing names back and forth from both sides is not going to solve the problem. I'm going to ask both sides to take a deep breath, and we'll let the minister respond from the top, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to take a breath. Please let me reiterate that the decision as to how or when the police will release information lies with the police and the police alone. This was not a matter that the government in any way interfered with or extracted any promises for. I'd remind the members of the Commissioner's statement in which he's made it equally clear that there was no interference in this case. And so those are the facts, and that's what I've shared with this House.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, multiple sources from the RCMP are accusing this government of political interference that risked police investigations into a tragic mass shooting. Leah Scanlon from the RCMP Communications is quoted as saying, the Commissioner releases a body count that we don't even have. It was all political pressure. That is 100% Minister and Prime Minister, end quote. Canadians aren't buying the Minister's excuse as he desperately tries to cover for the Prime Minister and save both their careers. If the NDP Liberals have nothing to hide, will they support the committee's investigation of this egregious political interference?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I would advise the members that there was no interference. At no point did our government pressure interfere in the operational decisions of the RCMP. It's been very clearly articulated in the Commissioner's statements from yesterday. But, Mr. Speaker, let me also add, Canadians, including those which were directly impacted by this tragedy, have expressed great concern about how and when the RCMP shared information with the public, and that is precisely why, Mr. Speaker, we specified in the order of reference for the Mass Casualty Commission that they examine the communications approach taken both during and after the event. That's the work of the Mass Casualty Commission, Mr. Speaker. That's the work that we will depend upon.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, it's time to look at records. There was a delay in actions from the government when there were the truckers' protests. Police bodies apparently asked them to enact the Emergency Measures Act. The police didn't ask them in the end, and the minister said, well, it was a purely political choice. Is the minister proud of having simply allowed the Prime Minister, like another did in 1970, by the way, to invoke the Emergency Measures Act against civilians based on falsehoods? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Well, yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of the government's work. During the illegal blockades, we made a necessary decision, the invocation of the Emergency Measures Act. This with Council of Policing Bodies. The Commissioner of the RCMP confirmed this before committee. And now we will collaborate with the investigation process before the Joint Committee in Parliament and with Justice Boulot in order to offer as much transparency as possible. And we will always defend that decision. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Belleau-Chambly. Let us now talk about the environment. What is going on with carbon sequestration? Falsehoods with regards to meeting government objectives on sequestration, purchasing Trans Mountain at a loss, subsidies to oil and gas. Baie du Nord. I'm sure that at the beginning, in a bona fide way, the minister signed what became a market of smoke and mirrors. Are the Liberals aware that they turned an environment minister into an oil and gas lobbyist? The Honourable Minister for the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my honourable colleague that as the Environment Minister, I never circumvented rules on environmental assessments. He did it not once, not twice when he was Minister for the Environment in Quebec. He did it thrice as Minister for the Quebec Environment. We, on our side, have implemented a plan to reduce emissions, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for South Surrey, White Rock.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are shocked by evidence in the Nova Scotia mass shooting inquiry showing RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki made a promise to the then Public Safety Minister and PMO to leverage the mass murders to get gun control laws passed. The most outrageous attempt to politicize the RCMP in Canadian history. Another woman leader forced to compromise principles for political expediency. We are calling for committee to investigate this political interference. Will the Prime Minister cooperate with this committee investigation?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
And of course, Mr. Speaker, of course, there was no promise. But I will again take the members back to the Commissioner's statement because I think it speaks for itself, in which he said, it's important to note that the sharing of information and briefings with the Minister of Public Safety are necessary, particularly during a mass shooting on Canadian soil. This is standard procedure. It does not impact the integrity of ongoing investigations or interfere with the independence of the RCMP. The Commissioner concludes, I take the principle of police independence extremely seriously, and it has been and will continue to be fully respected in all interactions. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for South Surrey, White Rock.
Mr. Speaker, this minister doesn't need a breath, he needs ethics. 22 people were brutally murdered in Nova Scotia, including an RCMP officer and a pregnant mother by a gunman with illegal firearms. What did the Prime Minister do? Coerce the RCMP Commissioner to use those innocent deaths to support a political agenda. Canadians now know they pressured the Commissioner to subvert an active investigation into mass murder. Canadians believe Superintendent Campbell. Shame on this government. Why did they politically influence and jeopardize a mass murder investigation?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the suggestion and the question about my ethics, I'll just consider the source and ignore the comment. Mr. Speaker,
I'm just going to cut that off for a second. No, wait. On both sides, please do not throw out insults. That's all I'm asking. And I've heard it from both sides, so I'm asking both sides to calm it down. If you throw one out, you deserve it back. I'm sorry. So that's enough from both sides. And if somebody says, again, they did it first, I feel like I'm in a kindergarten yard here.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, how low can a government go to go so far as to use mass murder for political purposes? Lee Scanlan, spokesperson for the RCMP, said, and I quote, the Minister, all these people, the Prime Minister, they were pushing what we could and couldn't say. It was political pressure. This government is totally immoral. Can the Prime Minister tell us who in his cabinet decided to politicise the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and when will he be removed from office? The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to advise this House no one made a choice to politicize the terrible tragedy and the murder of 22 people in Nova Scotia in 2020. Mr. Speaker, the independence of law enforcement operations is a key principle of our democracy. It's one that our government deeply respects and one that I have always defended. And at no point, Mr. Speaker, at no point did our government pressure or interfere with the operational decisions of the RCMP, including their communication strategy. I direct the members to the Commissioner's statement from yesterday, where she makes it very clear that there was no interference.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the RCMP Superintendent Campbell said, and I quote, the Commissioner said she promised the Minister for Public Safety and the Prime Minister's office that the RCMP would release this information. For her to make that promise, someone had to ask her to do it in the first place. This is not the first time the Prime Minister and his cabinet have abused their power. They try to make us believe that the RCMP investigators are lying, but Canadians see what is going on. We, the Conservatives, believe Superintendent Campbell. Does the Prime Minister believe him? Believe her?
Speakers, I've already made it clear I've never had a conversation with Mr. Campbell. The conversations between the Commissioner and her subordinates are something that she can speak to. However, I would reiterate for the member opposite that the independence of law enforcement operations is a key principle of our democracy, which is respected and defended by our government. And to assure the member, at no point did our government pressure or interfere in any of the operational communication decisions of the RCMP. I would direct the member to the Commissioner's statement in which he makes it crystal clear that no such interference took place.
The Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Mr. Speaker, there are very disturbing allegations that this government directed interference in an ongoing police investigation. Nova Scotians have suffered, and they deserve answers. The idea that any government would compromise an investigation for their own political gain is insulting for families of the victims. Any interference from the Prime Minister's office is completely unacceptable and breaks Canadians' trust in our institutions. Will this government launch a full investigation into these disturbing allegations to give Canadians the answers they need?
Honourable Minister.
And, Mr. Speaker, I will have to repeat once again that there was no interference. We did not place any pressure upon the RCMP for any reason. Mr. Speaker, several months before, we had made a promise to Canadians that we would ban assault-style rifles, and, Mr. Speaker, we kept that promise. But this terrible tragedy in Nova Scotia had nothing to do, was certainly not to be used, but, Mr. Speaker, we know that these weapons used in mass shootings are used for the purposes of killing as many people as possible. And, Mr. Speaker, we were highly resolved to act.
The Honourable Member for Churchill, Kiiwetinoong-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals face a test today. Will they take a good idea in my bill to fight climate change or side with their rich friends at the Infrastructure Bank, a corporate welfare scheme? Today we'll find out as MPs vote on my bill to support Indigenous and Northern communities to get the infrastructure they need to survive climate change. During this week's debate, we had to listen to a Liberal MP support public-private partnership scams and push more privatization. Mr. Speaker, the climate crisis is here, and Northern and Indigenous communities are paying the price. So will the Liberals stand with Northern and Indigenous communities or their billionaire friends?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, while we always recognize how we can improve delivering on infrastructure across this country, the member opposite's comments are completely out of touch with the reality of the work that the Infrastructure Bank is doing. Here's one example. Almost 49,000 homes are going to be connected in Manitoba to fiber projects in 53 rural municipalities. Does the member opposite and her leader, who advocated for the abolishment of the Infrastructure Bank, want to talk to those 48,000 residents who are now going to be connected to well-needed fiber because they feel that they can do better?
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Halting and reversing the decline of biodiversity is a critical issue that deserves everyone's efforts. Canada is showing leadership internationally in terms of fighting climate change and protecting nature. Can the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change update this House on the latest developments towards the achievement of an ambitious global framework on biodiversity. The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her work on this issue, and it's with great pride that I announce that Canada will host the World in Montreal and in December 22 for COP15. It's time for all countries on the planet to agree to protect at least 30% of our earth and oceans to avoid losing biodiversity by 2050.
Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Well, who would have thunk it, Mr. Speaker? The last time inflation was this high was 40 years ago, and we had another divisive, big tax and spend Liberal Prime Minister named Trudeau. They say history repeats itself, Mr. Speaker. I say we should have learned from the last experience. With so many Canadians struggling, does the Minister of Finance acknowledge that her $100 billion of stimulus spending is inflationary, that this level of inflation isn't fair, it isn't just? Will she admit today that it's just inflation?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, global inflation caused by a number of factors, which include supply chain bottlenecks, climate change, and the war in Ukraine, is having a significant impact on the household budgets of Canadians. While Canada's rate of inflation is below average when compared to the Euro area, the US, the OECD, we are continuing to focus on economic growth and making life more affordable for Canadians. Our measures have helped lift 1.3 million Canadians out of poverty, and important programs that have supported seniors, families, and individuals are indexed to the cost of living. We will continue to invest in Canadians while lowering our debt to GDP ratio and increasing Canada's long-term fiscal advantage.
Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
These Liberals always want to talk about what Moody thinks, but the only Moody that member should think about right now, Mr. Speaker, is the Moody of the Canadian people. Conservatives have been pointing out to the example of Alberta for months, where the government cut gas taxes, the price of gas dropped along with the province's inflation. Lower gas prices is a win for consumers and for the economy. Even President Biden is now calling for a 3-month gas tax holiday to do the same for the American people. Will the Finance Minister implement one today, or is the only holiday her government has in mind is a 3-month accountability holiday from Parliament?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we understand rising gas prices have had a negative impact on the household budgets of Canadians, but we also know that the increase is a global phenomenon in part resulting from the war in Ukraine. If we implement a tax holiday on oil and gas, energy companies could actually pocket the difference in cost, and there's no guarantee that the savings will be passed on to Canadian consumers. Similarly, our carbon price at 11 cents per litre is the only fee collected on gas that is returned to consumers, making life more affordable for 8 out of 10 Canadian families.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Canadians woke up this morning with another piece of bad news from this government. Inflation in our country is now at 7.7%, the highest rate in 40 years. That affects all families, notably the most humble amongst us. And the Conservatives have been asking for months for the gas tax to go down. We're not the only ones who think this would be good. The Democrat U.S. President, Mr. Biden, is also going to freeze gas tax for the next 3 months. Is the Prime Minister in agreement with President Biden to lower the gas tax? Mr. Speaker, we know that this is a very difficult period for millions of Canadians. Groceries are higher, and it's harder and harder to pay rent. And that is why we have lowered middle-class taxes on 2 occasions. The Conservatives voted against this, and that is also the reason why old age security payments that we have just increased, support has increased. And that's the same thing for the Canada Child Benefit. We are here to help Canadians to face the rising cost of living, and the Conservatives are opposed to all of these measures. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. They don't take inspiration from President Biden, and it means that Canada is the only G7 country that hasn't lowered its gas taxes. We don't have to go to the other end of the world to know that tax cuts work. In Canada, in Alberta, on April 1st, while the federal government was raising its carbon taxes, the provincial government there lowered its tax, and the result, inflation went down there. Why does it work in Alberta? Well, would it not work everywhere? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Minister, I'd like to correct my colleague with all due respect. The U.S. has not yet lowered these taxes. They know that this will not directly help Canadians. On this side of the House, we're helping Canadians directly with benefits for Canadians who are having a hard time finding affordable housing, and with direct support for seniors and families with young children. Mr. Speaker, we're here to support Canadians, and the Conservatives are there to support oil companies. That's the reality. The Honourable Minister for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, the government is taking citizens for a ride on the passport file. Today, it started handing out tickets with appointment times to people waiting in line outside in Montreal. But by 8:20 a.m., the tickets were all gone. They handed out about 75 tickets, according to TVA News, 75 out of the thousands of people waiting for an appointment. Mr. Speaker, is this really their best solution of the week? Because if so, we're really not out of the woods. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, as I said, we adopted a new strategy to react to the high demand we're seeing in Montreal in particular. There are hundreds and thousands of people who are waiting outside of Service Canada offices, and we offered them tickets for appointments. And I was assured by the management there in Quebec that the management would be there throughout the day to make sure that everyone in line receives the information they need, and also appointments for people who are traveling urgently. The Honourable Minister for Thérèse de Blainville. I'm really reassured. But it's a good thing that the federal government isn't administering vaccines. Remember how things went at vaccine centres. We were welcomed, informed, directed, even if millions of us asked for an appointment at the same time. But what a stark contrast with passports. At the federal level, we pay half our tax to this government, and they're still unable to offer us simple photo ID. Will they at least acknowledge their great incompetency? I hope they'll at least be ashamed. The Honourable Minister. Passports are a very safe document, and there is a question of integrity and a process that is in place that is very important. It represents Canadian citizenship. We have to ensure that the integrity of the process is intact. Also, we received roughly 85% of applications that are first-time applications. So it's even more complex than a simple renewal, but we are still here. We've hired more staff, and we will be there for Canadians. Thank you.
For Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Block.
Speaker, residents in my riding are making hard decisions when it comes to everyday essentials, like Paul from Omimi, caught in a catch-22 where he has to work more than 50 hours a week just to make a living, or Barbara, a senior in Bobcaygeon, who worries as her savings dwindle away, or Scott from Burnt River, concerns that the ongoing cost of diesel could mean the end of his business, or Brad from Peterborough, who must make tough decisions between gas for work or food from the family. When will the Prime Minister end his reckless spending and finally address the cost of living crisis?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we know that this is a difficult time for millions of Canadian families. Groceries are more expensive, bills are adding up. That's why we cut taxes for the middle class and small businesses and lifted more than 1.3 million Canadians out of poverty. We're reducing childcare costs for parents. We're delivering increased benefits for our seniors. We're also making investments to boost Canada's long-term growth and create good-paying jobs, all while lowering our debt-to-GDP ratio every single year, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inflation has risen almost a full point month over month to 7.7, near record levels. Europe has reduced fuel taxes. The U.S. president is now calling for a gas tax holiday. What is this government doing? Increasing fuel taxes. The last time world oil prices were this high was 2014, and the price of gas in Canada was $1.40, 70 cents less than today. The Minister of Finance says this is beyond her control, but she is ignoring her role in actually escalating inflation. When will she take her foot off the gas on fuel tax increases?
Come on.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Speaker, certainly affordability challenges that are facing Canadians today are significant. It is incumbent on the government to take steps to ensure that we are addressing that issue. As the honourable member knows, the Minister of Finance discussed last week the investments that we are making to address the affordability challenges faced by Canadians of modest incomes. We will continue to look at how we can actually work to ensure affordability going forward. Concurrently, we are working to address the energy security challenge, increasing the amount of oil and gas that we are producing in this country to stabilize global energy prices and allow them to be reduced over time to get away from Vladimir Putin and the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the impacts on energy prices.
Honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, Brandy from my riding is a single mom struggling to get by. The higher cost of gas and groceries has forced her to go to the food bank. And now CRA, after 7 years of auditing her without finding anything, has decided she has to pay $30,000 in back taxes, and the minister has taken no action to revisit her case. Will the Liberals resolve Brandy's case and suspend the tax on gas like Joe Biden is planning to do?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government was there to support Canadians throughout the pandemic. The CRA is extending its audit and recovery efforts, but the people who are affected can be reassured we're also there to help them. And people who need assistance can communicate with the CRA to find a solution that can be tailored to their needs. And I'd like to reassure my colleague that the CRA will proceed with great empathy and compassion. Thank you.
For Brampton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The 2017 Canada Survey on Disability found that more than 6 million Canadians report having a disability. We need to create a Canada that is inclusive from the start. That's why today, the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion announced that new funding for licensed early learning and childcare centres. Through the Enabling Accessibility Fund, a federal grants and contribution program that supports infrastructure projects that improve the accessibility, safety, and inclusion of persons with disability. Can the minister share with us more about this important announcement?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I was pleased to join my honourable colleagues, the Minister of Family, Children and Social Development, President of the Treasury Board, to announce that as part of our government's commitment to building a barrier-free Canada, we are investing $12.5 million in funding for 225 early learning and childcare centres across Canada. Through the Accessibility Fund, childcare centres will receive specialised equipment so children with disabilities can thrive in a safe environment that respects their needs. We're proud to invest in these organizations.
The Honourable Member for Peace River Westlock.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to the Harper Conservatives, the Liberal government has an important tool to protect kids abroad from sexual exploitation. The Liberals can refuse passports to Canadians who are likely to travel abroad to exploit children. But the Liberals aren't doing this. Since they've come to power, they've only revoked 13 passports from child predators and refused 8. There are 42,000 child predators in Canada. To the Prime Minister, over the last 7 years, how many passports have they given to convicted child sex offenders?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
It is extraordinarily important that we get the integrity of passports right. That is something that I have been communicating, and one of the reasons why when someone is applying for the first time for a passport that we can assure that we are getting this right. It's another reason why when we are looking at children's passports that we want to make sure that we have permission from both parents, that if there is a separation that we go through the custody agreements, because at all costs we must protect our children, and that's exactly what we continue to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Aides-Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the passport crisis continues. This morning in a minister with Paul Arcand, the minister stated that she knew the situation would become problematic for months, and she did nothing. She waited. We can no longer see how desperate the situation is, and the minister misled Canadians by telling them that they would receive their passports on time, but she knew full well this would not be the case. What is she going to say to the thousands of people that are waiting outside, online, for their passports? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the situation in Montreal is the worst in the country right now. There are hundreds of people waiting in line in Montreal at the passport office, and we know that with the Saint Jean Baptiste holiday, there are other people who want to travel, and right now we've changed our strategy to be able to make sure people do receive services and the information they need. We're going to continue to react to the situation to make sure Canadians will receive their passport. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, an MP's office is an outpost for Canadians for help in getting their issues fixed. And boy, with this incompetent Liberal government, the people of Oshawa need a lot of assistance. Passports, airports, immigration, public safety, foreign affairs, CERB, it goes on and on. Our office is working around the clock fixing these Liberal failures. When will the Liberals stop downloading their screw-ups onto constituency offices, take responsibility for their chaos, get back to work, and fix their mess?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to clarify something because the members opposite keep saying that public servants need to get back to work. Mr. Speaker, public servants at Service Canada have been in offices for months. They have been working around the clock. And the people that they're talking about that are working from home, Mr. Speaker, they're the same people that delivered CERB to 9 million Canadians, Mr. Speaker. They're the same people, Mr. Speaker, who have delivered EI, OAS, and CPP at the highest rate in 15 years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know there are challenges with passports right now. We continue to work around the clock, and public servants are working.
The Honourable Member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, climate change is top of mind for the residents of my riding of Davenport. In fact, I recently received a handwritten letter from an 11-year-old constituent, Selena. She's concerned about the environment and wanted to know what our federal government's doing to protect it. At the end of her letter, she says, we can all make a difference. Together, we can make the world a safer place for all of its residents. Can the Minister of Environment and Climate Change update this House on the latest initiatives that our federal government has in place to protect the environment, combat climate change, and make the world a safer place?
Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member from Davenport for her advocacy and her work on these important issues. Yes, indeed. And Selena's right. We need to do better when it comes to protecting our environment, which is why this week we announced that we were banning 6 single-use plastics that are polluting our rivers, that are polluting our environment, that are ending up on our streets and everywhere, Mr. Speaker. And between now and 2030, it's 22,000 tons of plastic waste that we will take out of our environment, 1.3 million tons that we will take out of the Canadian economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, 3 years ago, the Liberals created a $150 million Veteran Survivors Fund. As of today, $0 have been spent. Yesterday, the PBO found out almost double is required to make this right. Mr. Speaker, thousands of veterans' widows are living in poverty, and the government continues to break their promise to eliminate the sexist, archaic gold diggers clause. When will this government stop punishing veterans for finding love after 60?
The Honourable Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate my honourable colleague's question, and she is aware that we're committed to making sure veterans and their spouses have the support they need. We have been working with Statistics Canada and the Canadian Institute for Military and Veterans Health Research to gather information from the survivors. I understand, of course, that the committee has studied this issue, and I look forward to the report from the committee. We will use the results to reform, to evaluate the situation. I can assure my honourable colleague we will do everything to make sure we provide the services that our veterans need and deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, here we are again. Last June, the government introduced a bill to implement the Canada Disability Benefit days before Parliament rose and then called an election. This June, the government introduced the exact same bill. Now, it's been 20 days and we've yet to debate it once. 9 other bills have been prioritized since. Canadians with disabilities continue to disproportionately live in poverty across the country. They want to see emergency supports. They want to see action. Does this government understand that simply introducing a bill does nothing to help Canadians with disabilities today?
The Honourable Minister for Employment.
Since 2015, we've done so much as a government to help persons with disabilities, and I was honored to reintroduce Bill C-22 in the House several weeks ago. We're working with the disability community to ensure that their needs and wants are reflected in the bill, that we lift as many people out of poverty as we can with the new Canada Disability Benefit. We're about to release our first ever Disability Inclusion Action Plan. Financial security is a key pillar of that plan, Mr. Speaker, as is employment. We're going to make sure we get this done.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for question period today. C'est tout le temps que nous avons. Draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Jeannie McLean, Minister of Education and Minister responsible for the Women and Gender Equity Directorate for Yukon. L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue, a point of order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was consent, and I believe that you will note that there is unanimous consent for the following motion. That this House ask for an independent investigation on the management from Hockey Canada based on what happened in June 2018 to figure out if this was an isolated event or if there are shortcomings in the way that Hockey Canada handles reported complaints of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other types of misconduct. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All those who are opposed to the motion, please say nay.
D'accord.
The House has heard the motion. Those who are against the motion, please say nay. Adopted. Carried.
We have another point of order. The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising on a question of privilege concerning last night's crash of the hybrid parliament system. I was working in my Confederation building office here in the precincts of the House of Commons, but could not log into the Zoom portion of the House's proceedings last night. We were discussing Bill C-21, the government's cynical approach to gun control, which was to be followed by Bill C-28, a response to the Supreme Court's decision, which relieved extremely intoxicated criminals of responsibility for their crimes. These are both issues which many of my constituents are very passionate about, and I wanted to be present for the debates. Several colleagues also tried to access the video conference for the sitting, but were unsuccessful, I'm told. I also understand that a meeting of the very important Special Joint Committee on the Declaration of Emergency, the committee looking into the government's choice to declare a national emergency over this winter's truck protests in Ottawa, had to be abandoned because of these technical failures. Beyond the obvious inconvenience and embarrassment of the hybrid system, which incredibly the government House Leader will be asking later today to be renewed for another year, this incident represents broadly, I believe, a breach of the privileges to be able to represent my constituents. Under the House Order of November 25, 2021, which reinstituted hybrid arrangements after last year's election, quote, members may participate in proceedings of the House either in person or by video conference, end quote. May participate, Mr. Speaker. There is no caveat or qualification to that. Nothing that says it's only applicable when all the technology lines are up. As much as I may think the hybrid parliament should be scrapped, the House has agreed to those arrangements until at least tomorrow. So I sought to exercise my right to participate remotely from my parliamentary office. Yet I simply could not. While I acknowledge that the House suspended last evening shortly after the connectivity problems were flagged, which was appropriate, the way the House adjourned was not, however. According to the records of the House, the sitting resumed at 8:54 last evening when the Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader then sought unanimous consent for the House to adjourn. The Chair then canvassed the House in the usual manner and found there was agreement for the motion. Since I was trying to attend remotely and where the technical arrangement prevented me from doing so, I was unable to present for that vote. That, too, is a breach of my privileges, Mr. Speaker. I have since come to understand that there has been a consensus of party representatives to reconvene the House for the purpose of adjourning when it became obvious that the technical issues could not be resolved prior to midnight. That said, I understand that my House Leader's office had been assured by the Government House Leader's office that a Minister of the Crown would be proposing the adjournment of the House. That is a critical point in these circumstances. Last night's sitting was an extended sitting under the House Order of May 2nd, better known as Motion 11, which permits a Cabinet Minister to move an adjournment motion on a point of order which is deemed adopted upon being moved. There would have been no vote, no opportunity to object. The NDP Liberal agreement on Motion 11 already stripped me of those rights. Had any of the 39 members of the Ministers of the Crown, been here to manage the business of the House could have properly adjourned early under the Liberals' ruthless Motion 11. But they didn't even manage that correctly. Instead, there was a vote, and I was not able to be present for it. Your predecessors, Mr. Chair, have found several prima facie cases of privilege concerning the inability of a member to reach the House, and especially where there is a vote. Mr. Speaker, Reagan put it well on April 6, 2017 at page 10,246 of the debates, quote, "The importance of the matter of members' access to the precinct, particularly when there are votes for members to attend, cannot be overstated. It bears repeating that even a temporary denial of access, whether there is a vote or not, cannot be tolerated," end quote. He cited favorably the 21st report of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs from 2005 in relation to security arrangements on Parliament Hill for the visit of an American president. Quote, "The denial of access to members of the House, even if temporary, is unacceptable and constitutes a contempt of the House. Members must not be impeded or interfered with while on their way to the chamber or when going about their parliamentary business. To permit this would interfere with the operation of the House of Commons and undermine the preeminent right of the House to the service of its members," end quote. Those cases concerned physical obstruction. But page 111 of House of Commons Procedure and Practices, 3rd edition, reminds us, quote, "A member may also be obstructed or interfered with in the performance of his or her parliamentary functions by non-physical means," end quote. This new hybrid world obviously presents entirely new considerations which had not even been contemplated when those previous cases arose or when our procedural authorities were written. But O'Brien and Bosk answer at page 112, quote, "It is impossible to codify all incidents which might be interpreted as matters of objection or interference," end quote. That said, Mr. Speaker, I know that you yourself have been seized with considering just how privilege intersects with the virtual component of our proceedings from the very beginning. When the Procedure and House Affairs Committee first began studying these issues in the earliest weeks of the pandemic, you testified on April 21st, 2020, saying at page 5 of the evidence, quote, "By not having the connectivity or by having any issues, that could be an issue down the road," end quote. Later, you added at page 10, with particular relevance to my situation last night, quote, "Allowing individuals to vote is the heart of our system and it's the base of parliamentary privilege," end quote. You reinforced this point, Mr. Speaker, in your July 6, 2020 appearance before the same committee, commenting at page 6 of the evidence, quote, "It is a member's privilege to vote, and we don't want the member to lose that privilege or not be able to access it," end quote. But the issue goes much deeper than just attending votes. I could not attend any of the virtual sitting. Your predecessor, Peter Milliken, bluntly made the point about connection failures to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee on April 23rd, 2020 at page 19 of the evidence. Quote, "It would be a matter of privilege if they couldn't get into it." Taking the evidence the committee heard in the spring and summer of 2020, it presented 2 reports which helped form the structure of the hybrid system which has evolved here. Its views on these issues are equally clear. In its 5th report, presented in May 2020, the committee wrote at page 31, quote, "It is essential that any modifications to the procedures and practices of the House made in response to the COVID-19 outbreak fully respect the rights possessed by members under parliamentary privilege. Further, in the exercise of the rights accorded by parliamentary privilege, members have the right to full and equal participation in parliamentary proceedings, end quote. Last night, Mr. Speaker, I did not have full and equal participation in parliamentary proceedings. In its 7th report, presented in July 2020, the committee recommended at page 55, quote, that the virtual or hybrid parliament replicate the rules and customs of the House as closely as possible in order to fully ensure the democratic vote of Parliament, deliberation, accountability, and decision-making, as well as the parliamentary rights and privileges of members, end quote. Further in the report, page 60, the committee recommended, quote, that members participating virtually in any proceedings of the House of Commons enjoy and exercise the same parliamentary privileges that apply to members physically present, end quote. I was incapable of exercising the same rights and privileges as my colleagues inside the chamber last evening when the chair canvassed the House on the parliamentary secretary's unanimous consent request. As for the causes of the outage last night, I would submit to you that identifying the origins and motivations, if any, if either can even be identified, is immaterial to this question of privilege. Firstly, and most importantly, House business was conducted in defiance of the order adopted on November 25, 2021, denying me the opportunity to participate and vote in breach of parliamentary privilege. Secondly, that is a matter which a committee of this House with a privilege reference can determine. To quote Mr. Speaker Milliken on October 15, 2001, at page 6085 of the debates, quote, there is a body that is well equipped to commit acts of inquisition, and that is the Standing Committee on Procedures and House Affairs, which has a fearsome chairman, quite able to extract information from witnesses who appear before the committee with the aid of the capable members who form that committee of the House, end quote. Thirdly, even if the source of last night's technical difficulties can be readily pinpointed, I would refer you to the ruling of your predecessor, the Honourable Member of Regina Capel, on March 6, 2012, at page 5834 of the debates, where he found a prima facie case of privilege in connection with the online hacker collective Anonymous. I've long thought we need to get back to traditional in-person sittings of the House. Yesterday's situation is just the latest example of why it is so important. Although I recognize I'm straying into debate on motion 19, which is on today's schedule, the point remains that something serious happened last night, something which rose to the level of a breach of privilege, and a committee needs to get to the bottom of it. Should you agree, Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to move the appropriate motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I want to thank the honourable member, and the honourable government House Leader is rising on this point as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, an internet connectivity issue with an external service provider does not constitute question of privilege because it's outside of control of the House. House took appropriate action to restart it. Of course, these provisions have worked 99.9% of the time. I appreciate that the member who was in his office 100 or 200 meters away was impacted by this. All members were. But there are various things that are outside of our control that sometimes interrupt our proceedings. We're back here today. It continues to work. It has a 99.9% of the time. Mr. Speaker, I'd say that that's very effective.
Okay, the Honourable Opposition House Leader is rising.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issue, I think the Honourable Member from Calgary Centre expressed the issue, and that is that in the context of his participation in this House, that his participation was not able to occur. That is actually the point of his privilege today, which according to motion 11, and I think if you go back, Mr. Speaker, you'll see that he had every right to participate. He could not last night, and I think that's the basis. I would agree with him that that's the basis of what his point of privilege is. Thank you, sir.
The Honourable Member for Wellington Perth, suivi par l'honorable député de la Prairie. The Honourable Member for Wellington Perth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in response to the government House Leader, I would encourage him to first review the points that were raised by the member from Calgary Centre and then consult the authorities. And he would learn that, in fact, it isn't necessarily an internal challenge that would create a question of privilege. As has been clearly stated by Mr. Speaker Milliken, Mr. Speaker Regan, and Mr. Speaker, the current member for Regina Capel, external factors can, in fact, have an impact on the privileges and the dignity of this House. So for the government House leaders to say that because it was an internal or an external problem outside of the direct control of this government, this place, is incredibly misleading, Mr. Speaker, and I would encourage him to consult the authorities, which are available at the table in those wonderful green books, and have a review of what constitutes a question of privilege in this place.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the point of privilege, following the troubling events of yesterday, the Bloc Québécois would like to reserve a right to answer because we believe that the question is an important one and we would like to think about it and have our words at a later time.
In light of the amount of time that we have before we recess for summer, I will do my best to come back as soon as possible. Alors, si vous avez des...
So if you have any additions to make, I recommend that you do so as early as possible. As it is 3:35, pursuant to the order adopted on the 25th of November, 2021, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at second reading stage of Bill C-228 under private members' business.
Members.
Excitement, eh? Where's the vote sheet? Workout for the day.
La question est la...
The question is as follows.
Seconded by Mr. Lewis Essex, move that Bill C-228, an act to amend the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, the Companies Creditors Arrangements Act, and the Pension Benefit Standards Act, 1985, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Finance. La période...
The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote.
We'll start with the sponsor of the item.